Hey, it's Luke. This is the Korg EP-1. It was added to the Korg Collection 5. I know what you're thinking. It's just another electric piano plugin. That's what I thought too, but this is actually a whole lot more than that. Stick around because there's one of these effects I want to show you that has such a beautiful sound. And there's one thing that's missing in this plugin that I really hope they'll add in a future update. Let's have a look. So on the Korg website, they mention this here, that it reproduces the sound of 7 classic tine type, reed type electric pianos and vintage effects with high precision. So basically it means you've got 7 different pianos in here. And I love how when you switch them, you see the other ones. It's sort of nice to have the different pianos to look at. But let's just choose one of these at random. And just hearing it, it just sounds like a regular electric piano. I guess it sort of is, but it's got a whole bunch of extra features. And these effects here are really interesting, and I'll show you why in a moment. So you've got all your adjustments here. You can adjust the noise, the sound of the hammer. And you can just switch whichever piano you want. Okay, there are a few things that I find really interesting in here. First of all, you've got your settings here. So if you want to change the vibrato, but you can sort of tell as you change it here, it also changes it here. So you do have this on the main screen where you can do your adjustments all in one place instead of having to reach, because on this piano, it's over here. On this one, they're over here, and you can't really tell what it says. So this is basically a zoomed in version of whatever this is on whichever piano you choose. And I think these here stay the same no matter which one we choose. I hadn't noticed that at first. And the effects stay the same unless you change the preset. And we'll look at that in a moment. One thing I found that's really interesting here is if we switch something like the speed, and this works on any of these settings, no matter what you change, I don't know if you can tell right here, the numbers will change. So whatever you're working on, it gets adjusted here, and you can just go and set it to 100 or to whatever you want. One thing I found is these tool tips at the bottom are really well explained. So it really helps you figure out what the knob will do. And it's happened quite a few times when I first loaded it up that I was learning a lot just by seeing the tool tips and figuring out what each button or option does. So let's talk about the effects. There's one in particular that I just love. They mentioned that there are 3 insert effects and a dedicated reverb slot. There are 31 effect types to choose from, including vintage pedals, guitar amps, and tape delay to modern reverse delays and shimmer reverb. When I saw this, I thought shimmer reverb sounds interesting, and it was probably the first thing I tried. I'm glad I did, because that is the effect that I've been talking about. Over here, you've got basically just a simplified version of each of the effects. And we can turn on the compressor. Actually, let's go to something like a delay here. And if we go to the pedal, you can tell a little bit more what it does. The interesting thing is, actually, let's go right into this effect. So this is effect 1. And we go here, and you can tell there's a whole lot more. So this has just a few options here. Look at all these options, and it's built right in, which is really nice because you can get an interesting sound out of it without having to load a whole bunch of extra effects a lot of the time. It just saves a little bit of time to have everything in one spot. You've got the different taps on here. You've got the feedback for each tap, which is actually really interesting, because I don't think I've seen that before. Usually the feedback is on the whole delay unit. I'm sure it's on some other plugins, but I'm not used to seeing that. Okay, so that's the first effect. You've got the second and third. You can adjust them to whatever. And the fourth one is the reverb. You can also set a second reverb. You can have all these being reverbs if you want. One thing I noticed, if you look here, first of all, you've got a bunch of different types of effects. Then you can choose the type of reverb. There's 5 different types of reverb. We'll go to the shimmer because that's the one you'll want to hear. And then underneath shimmer, you have other options, which is, in this case, you've got a whole bunch of different presets. And these are presets for the actual reverb itself. So you've got so many options, and you might be hearing what it's doing, and I'll bet you that's what it is. Riser. This is my favorite reverb in here. It's probably one of the nicest sounds I've heard out of any plugin I've ever used. And I wish this was available outside of this, because I would use this on so many instruments. So you can tell that it sort of has that rise at the end. If we remove it, we'll just have clear. Just very simple. But then if we add the riser with those same notes, it adds a little bit afterwards, and you can adjust. It's a little wobbly. It might be what you're looking for, but it might be a little bit too much. But if we remove it here, it adds a little bit, and even turn the time. It just brings it up really slowly. And you might want to bring the wet dry down so it's just a little bit in the background. It just adds an extra dimension to your sounds. And of course, it'll work on any of these sounds. So if we go to the reverb here and go to shimmer again and riser. I don't know if I like it on this. Let's try with a different preset here. So we're going to go to shimmer again and riser. You can tell it's almost like, it almost turns it into a little bit of a choir. I don't know. There's something about the sound. Anyways, that just sounds so good. There are obviously other effects here. Submarine sound, that's a little bit darker of a reverb. I could just hear this in a movie. And like I mentioned, you can add the reverb on any of these. So you can have a whole bunch of reverbs if you want, have the spring on here and just have this wider sound because you're using a few different reverbs. And if you look at all of these different options, like you can get so many different sounds and process the piano exactly how you want it. One thing I noticed that's interesting here is these pitch bend settings. You've got up and down separately, which you don't usually see. Usually if you've got an adjustment, it's on the whole thing. But there's something else that's interesting about this. I'm going to turn the volume down quite a bit because this might get loud. If you bring this up, you can bring it all the way to 60, which is 5 octaves. And this is interesting because I have a touch strip here. So I'm able to go in between spots and you can get really interesting sounds. Almost like a robot talking, like R2-D2 or something. And if you use a normal pitch bend wheel like this instead, you can get some interesting sounds out of it as well. So it's worth bringing this up to see what kind of sounds you can get out of this. There are a few really interesting sounds in here. Like this is one of them. Another one is under synthy, and I can't remember which one it is. Might be this one. Nope. Maybe this one. Yeah, it's this one. It doesn't sound like an electric piano. It just sounds like a synth. And then if you want something that sounds completely different, it's this noise percussion here. And I'm assuming they're using a little bit more of the hammer sound and less of the instrument. When I use the sustain pedal, you can sort of get a little bit of a melody sound. But this would give you a really good starting point to do some sound design in here. This is just by changing one thing, and all of a sudden we've got a completely different sound. So I do love this thing, but there are a few things that I wish it had. The first one is reordering these presets. I don't think there's a way to do it. If there is, please let me know in the comments, but I really don't think there's a way to reorder them. So if you want your delay before your EQ or after your EQ, you're not able to move it around once you've set it up. I'm wondering if we might be able to save it as an effect. I think we could do that. You could save it as an effect and then go into the other one and load that effect that you just saved. So I guess that's one way to do it, but it would be nice if we were able to just drag these over and just move them around. I'd love it if clicking on these effects would open up this screen here, but it doesn't. You have to go here manually. Parallel processing would be really nice. I don't know if I'd use it that much, but it would be a nice option. Okay, the big thing that's missing in here, and I'm hoping they add it later, is there aren't enough presets. Like if we remove this, there are about 50 presets in here, which is nothing, especially for Korg plugins. Like the M1 has, I think it's over 3,500 of them. So, I mean, there are some really nice presets, but it would be great to have way more of these. I'm going to make my own, I think, and have a little bit more of a starting point for a lot of these sounds. A lot of the time with electric pianos, you don't really need a whole lot of presets because there's not that much you can do. But with this, there's so many effects, so many adjustments that you could really have 1,000 presets and they probably all sound different. So that's the Korg EP-1. As you can tell, I really love this thing. Hopefully it can help you make a decision if you're looking at buying this plugin. And if you're using it already, I'm hoping you're making some fantastic music with it. All right, I think I'm going to go make some deep house music with this. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.